Okay. I want to welcome, I'm Aaron Souza. I'm the Dean of the College of Human Medicine, and I want to welcome you to the Secchia Center and to the Fall 2024 Ambassador Peter F. Secchia Lecture Series. I am so grateful for the Secchia family. We have Joan, Mark, and Charlie here today. And I think we all know that Peter is delighted to see you all here. He liked any number of things in life, but collaboration and community were amongst the highest, and this community in particular. And I think that he would be really excited to meet and talk with Kevin and the mix of science and entrepreneurship and what that means to people, and Kevin will speak to that. But today's just a great day. It's wonderful to see you all. This is going to be a really fascinating, exciting talk. It's a little bit about what universities like Michigan State University exist for. This is about spreading information and discovery, making it available to our communities, having that become an economic driver to make the lives of people better. So thank you for participating in that. Thank you for being a part of the college. And I'm really excited to introduce Kevin Conroy, who's going to be our speaker today. He is the chairman and CEO of Exact Sciences. And he has transformed that organization from really just sort of barely making it into the world's premier cancer diagnostic company with 6,500 employees and products that you will know and recognize, and maybe most importantly for a company that has technology as its base, a robust pipeline. And that is the great intellectual value, right, that companies bring and that investors recognize. Since 2014, millions of Americans have used Cologuard to screen for colorectal cancer, which is, of course, the second leading cause of cancer death in the U.S. They also have a product called Oncotype DX, which has spared more than 1 million breast cancer patients from chemotherapy while helping to predict the risk of their cancer returning. I'm a general internist, and I mostly take care of hospitalized patients now when I have the privilege to do some clinical work. But before that, I did primary care. And over the course of my career and the last 100 years, there has been a steady progression of first figuring out that you could use drugs for cancer and radiation, and then figuring out that based on the organ, there were different treatments that would be better, and then on the cell type, that there would be different things that we could do or should do for you, and then markers, and then dozens of markers, and thousands of markers, and now the DNA of your very specific cancer. And it follows the treatment of the use of antibiotics, from we just treated your pleurisy, to we treated your pneumonia, to we treated the particular bacteria in your lungs, to now everybody who gets treated in the hospital with antibiotics, we know which bugs or which drugs your bug is susceptible to. There has been a continuous march toward more precise therapy for people. This is the next step, this kind of work. And so on the sort of shoulders of that long legacy, it's my pleasure to invite Kevin Conroy to the podium to talk about his work and his company.
Thank you, Aaron, and a very special thanks to Joan. Joan, you and Peter have done so much, and it's just amazing to see the impact here. I know you both have had a passion for science and entrepreneurship. That is something that is near and dear to our hearts at Exact Sciences. And as a result, it's just the chance to meet you last night before dinner and to see the impact of your work. It's just a wonderful thing. So thank you very much. Thank you, Dean Souza, and to all the Spartans out there. It's just an honor to be here. I never when I was at Michigan State, thought I'd be asked to speak at the medical school. So this is an incredible honor. I am one of 5 Spartans in our family out of 5 children. My oldest, the oldest of the 5, Colleen, is a double Spartan. She's right here. Colleen Mansour, and with a degree in HR and a master's in HR. And my father, Joe Conroy, a former state senator from Flint, Michigan. So the story of Exact Sciences started with a meeting at the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic is an incredible research institution, a medical institution, and they had this incredible gastroenterologist by the name of Dr. David Ahlquist, who had over 300 publications in the field of colon cancer and colon cancer screening. He had a long-term vision of eradicating colon cancer through a non-invasive means of screening for the disease. He knew that with cervical cancer, a disease that used to be the #1 killer of women, that disease now is number 13 in terms of cancer deaths because of the invention of a pap smear. The pap smear was invented in the 1960s and slowly became adopted, and it found the precursor lesion that leads to cancer. And then by finding that lesion and removing the lesion, it actually prevented the disease. So I had a meeting with Dave in late February 2009. Now, it was really cold in Rochester, Minnesota. I didn't have a lot to do because I was, as they say, between opportunities. And we had just sold a company that developed a cervical cancer screening test looking for the HPV virus. So a company called Exact Sciences called me and said, hey, Kevin, would you like to interview for the CEO job? And I went out to Boston to meet with the team, but it didn't necessarily make a lot of sense because the company had been around for 12 years and it had twice tried to develop a test and neither time it worked. And there was a lawyer and accountant left. And it was barely hanging on to being a public company with about $20 million in the bank. That was all there was to Exact Sciences and an 8-person board of directors. But they wouldn't give up on the vision of being able to upend and change the way colon cancer is screened for and detected. And so they sent me out to meet with Dave Ahlquist. And I showed up at this building at the Mayo Clinic and met with Dave. And we had a 2-part discussion, each of 2 hours. The first part was about colon cancer. And the second part was about what he called a pan-cancer screening test. He was a real visionary, and what he articulated, he had a slide that looked just like this, and it just had the #1 on it. Colon cancer is cancer is the #1 cause of death for people under age 85. #1. 1 in 2 people will be diagnosed with cancer. And Dave made this point, we have to move to earlier detection, that there is no therapy that is as effective as early detection. That was the genesis of his research, who he was as a physician. And he said, let's start with colon cancer. And he described that cancer is a disease of the DNA. There are changes, very tiny changes that occur in the structure of the DNA which cascade towards cancer. And there are mutations that occur. There are things called methylation that occurs to DNA, a variety of changes that occur that if you can detect in a human sample, you can potentially detect the disease when it's earlier and much more treatable. So DNA has 3 billion base pairs. There are 4 letters that make up DNA. I know a lot of people in this room with a medical background know that. I didn't know all of what went into this before I started my career in the field of advanced cancer diagnostics. And Dave said, look, Kevin, we know that there is this new concept called, this new discovery called DNA methylation, which is a methyl molecule attaches to the DNA and turns off a gene. Well, if that gene, if the purpose of that gene is to create a protein, and the protein is to stop cell proliferation and division, you start that process of leading to cancer. And so his research was around these DNA methylation markers that could be found. And he also made the point that is you could find these markers in a patient's stool sample. So I thought this was a little, crazy to think that you could actually find that really rare event in a patient's stool sample. So we spent a couple of hours talking about this. We then talked about something even more far out there, which was, he said, look, we can do a blood draw from a patient, and we can find DNA that is coming from tumors within a patient in their blood supply. Now, the DNA in a patient's blood only has a 15-minute half-life. That means every 15 minutes, half of the DNA just disappears. Gets chewed up by enzymes or whatever else is in the plasma. And he said, but if we can find that DNA and we can see those changes, we can detect cancer from a simple blood draw, all cancers. And he said, so ultimately the real goal should be to screen a whole person, not individual organs within a person. That was the start of this talk. It was 2009. And I left that meeting knowing that I was going to focus on this. And the first part of the focus was on colon cancer. Colon cancer, there are about 150,000 new cases every year in the US. Unfortunately, it's becoming a disease of younger people. It is now increasing at an alarming rate among people 40 and older. They just lowered the guidelines to 45. 150,000 new cases, 50,000 deaths a year from a preventable disease. Now, if you diagnose colon cancer in stage 1 or 2, 9 in 10 people survive. If you diagnose colon cancer in stage 1, about a foot of your colon is resected, stitched back together. In most cases, when you go back and look there 6 months later, you don't even see where that cut took place. And there's no chemotherapy for stage 1 typically. 98% survival rate. So if you can find this disease now one step earlier, when there's a precancerous polyp, you snip out the polyp usually with a colonoscopy procedure. That's the treatment. It's like the cervical cancer paradigm. You can actually lead to disease eradication if you can just get everybody screened in a regular, frequent way. Unfortunately, as Dave described, he said that only half of people are willing to get a colonoscopy. And so the colonoscopy is really effective for the 50% of the people who are willing to undergo it, who can afford it, who have access to it. He described that gastroenterologists reside in urban centers. But if you go to northern Michigan, it's a lot harder to find a gastroenterologist. And so his point was, we need a test that's accurate, that is effective, and it's accessible to everybody in the country. And so he laid this all out, and he said the answer is a non-invasive stool-based approach. At the same time that I was meeting with Dave, I had 3 friends who had been diagnosed with colon cancer, and then a couple of years later, my cousin's wife, Jackie. So Bill, Jamie, Wendy, Jackie, only Wendy is still alive, all diagnosed in their 40s. And so at the time that I joined Exact Sciences, I had these 3 friends who were diagnosed. And then my cousin Jackie was diagnosed. This is a preventable disease. And so it really resonated. And as I left that meeting with Dave, I called him when I got home and I said, I want to do this. Dave wasn't part of Exact Sciences, so I said, I'm going to accept the job at Exact Sciences, but I want, I want to work with you to see this come to fruition. And that's what we did, we went right to work. We developed in 3 months, and the Mayo Clinic has never moved this fast. We had an agreement with the Mayo Clinic to share in the intellectual property. Whatever we developed together was joint, and Mayo Clinic would get a royalty forever. And that was regardless if we invented any patents. Now, we ended up developing a lot of technologies, but the deal was we're just going to work together as one team. And so it was Dave Ahlquist and Graham Lidgard. Now, Graham was by far the most preeminent molecular diagnostic test developer in the world. He lived in San Diego. He lived actually a block off the beach in La Jolla at age 59, and he was thinking about retiring. And so we brought him into Madison, Wisconsin in July, because we knew we had a very short window of time to recruit him. And he and his wife, Carol, moved to Madison, Wisconsin in October. Graham had 80 tests that were approved by the FDA under his, prior to that 25, 30-year career. And so you had this alchemy between Dave, this incredible clinician, and Graham, who just knows more about developing these really complicated tests that are based on DNA and RNA than anybody in the world. And that's when the magic started. That's when we had a lot of work to do. So up until then, it was all kind of exciting and visionary, but then we had to first really understand the biology of the disease. We had to develop an assay. And developing an assay was hard because imagine what's in your gut. So you have a polyp that is shedding a lot of cells into your gut, but you have bacteria in your gut. 1 trillion bacteria in your gut, they all have DNA. The rest of your colon, your stomach, your small intestine, they're all shedding DNA into the gut. How in the world do you find one copy of an altered piece of DNA in the background of 1 million other copies of DNA? That's where Graham's magic came in. And he started developing a test that could extract just the little chunks of the portion of that 3 billion base pair, like 200 of the base pairs, that were of interest. Nobody had ever really thought about just extracting just those little chunks of DNA before. He figured out a way to do that, and the scientific team. He's such Graham is a visionary, and he saw things that other people didn't see. And then we had to develop a test for the particular markers. But you don't just develop an assay, because that's with manual pipetting. He said, Kevin, if millions of people are going to do this test, we're going to have to develop an automated system, platform, robotic platform to do the testing. The challenge with that is when we went out to quote out what that system would cost for an expert company to develop it, they said 4 years and $40 million. We didn't have 4 years and $40 million. You know, we had $20 million in the bank, and we knew we could afford about $100,000 a week. And this was, you know, in 2009, 2010, there was something called the Great Recession going on. Try raising money on Wall Street for this effort. Anyway, so Graham said, Kevin, go out and recruit this guy in San Diego. He's the best in the world. He'll hire 3 people, and he'll get this job done. And in 18 months, James Light, a PhD in biochemistry with a side hobby in software development and automation, with a team of 3 people, developed that automation platform in 18 months, kind of doing the impossible. The other thing we had to do was we needed to run a clinical trial. We went to the FDA and said, we want to run a 10,000 patient clinical trial and get every single person to get a colonoscopy and every single person to get this little test called the fecal immunochemical test and the Cologuard test. And they said, no, it's too big, you can't do it. Don't even start. And we actually had this battle with the FDA. We wanted to go big and harder, and they said, no, you'll never get it done, which reminded us of what the investors were saying. You'll never get it done, nobody will ever do this test. That was the key theme over and over and over. And so this is a little video.
In the world of diagnostics, Nobody had ever run a 10,000 patient study before.
Well, normally you can do a study with a couple hundred patients.
You know, I've done these little clinical trials, but nothing like that before. Hell no. Holy cow.
It took a village. It was all of us together, and Dr. Imperiali leading the way.
Nobody thought you could enroll 10,000 patients. So that was new. There weren't those large-scale studies that identified the test characteristics with such precision. It changed the trajectory of colon cancer screening in the U.S. And all of a sudden you could detect nearly all of colon cancer with a non-invasive test. The goal was to get the study published in a high-visibility journal.
The New England Journal of Medicine is widely regarded as the premier medical journal.
And they were immediately interested.
We published it in the New England Journal of Medicine in 2014.
And then we needed to submit to the FDA for approval.
So how about FDA? Was that an adventure?
The government created an innovative new approach to get both FDA approval and Medicare coverage at the same time.
We were the trailblazers in setting that up.
It was hard. We were building the plane as we fly it. Nobody complained, nobody questioned it, and everybody really bought in that this would be a game changer.
But at the same time, there was also a little bit of that anxiety and fear of like, but it might not be.
The technical document that was submitted for approval was multiple thousands of pages. It was unbelievable.
Things went well.
The FDA just approving the first non-invasive colon cancer screening test. A company behind the new test is Exact Sciences. It's good to see you.
We received FDA approval and Medicare coverage on the same date.
That had never happened before.
I remember hearing the results of the panel and everybody cheered. That's been a highlight of my career.
So one would think at this point life is really good.
Even after we got FDA approval, the risk hadn't gone away. You know, we had to get through USPSTF.
U.S. Preventative Services Task Force.
The most important guideline group came out with draft guidance that said there wasn't enough evidence behind Cologuard to recommend it.
It was initial devastation, and everybody was totally depressed. The market, the investors, everybody who was supporting us was saying, oh, that's the end.
So this group, USPSTF, sets the guidelines for really preventive medicine, primary care in the US. And you can't talk to them. It's not like the FDA where you can engage and have a conversation. It's a group of preeminent volunteers, and they cover dozens and dozens of subjects, and they only meet on colon cancer every 5 to 8 years. So finally they took a meeting with us or sent a message to us that said, you need a second study. And I remember calling Dave Ahlquist and saying, Dave, I am really sorry. Like, this is going to be a 5-year pause on the whole company. We had FDA approval. We were offering the test, but until you get into the main guidelines, insurance companies won't cover the test. So we were going to lose money, and we were going to lose so much money, we really decided we were going to have to narrow the company way down. And I called Dave and I said, I'm really sorry, but this is a huge setback. And he said, Kevin, no, we have that second study. Remember, you funded the study in the Alaska Native population. Dave had an affinity for doing research among Alaskan natives who have the highest rate of colon cancer in the world. And we had done a mini version of that big study among 1,000 native Alaskans. And I said, Dave, that's great, but we have 30 days to get it published, and that study isn't done. He said, Kevin, I just got the data last week. And I said, still, we need a peer-reviewed publication in 30 days, or we have to wait another 5 to 8 years. And he said, you leave that to me. 3 weeks later, he had in Mayo proceedings, so he obviously had friends at the Mayo Clinic. I called him the mayor when he walked through the Mayo Clinic. He had the respect of everybody. And 3 weeks later, we had that publication. We made the cutoff by 1 week. And we had the second study. The second study, by the way, showed even better performance than the first study. And the performance of Cologuard it detects 94% of stage 1 and 2 cancers. And some of these tumors are 7 millimeters. They're tiny. Cologuard finds those cells and the DNA inside them and detects them. And it detects 42% of all precancers, including the really small precancerous polyps that are 1 centimeter. And the larger, more advanced precancers, like my father had, he was one of the first people to get the test, a 3 centimeter lesion, it detects those much more easily. And now we have the next version of Cologuard that we expect FDA approval from. The first version has about a 13% false positive rate. This next version has a 7% false positive rate. So we've really reduced the false positives. We've increased cancer detection to 96%, and to the most advanced precancer detection to 75%. So the science keeps pushing forward, which was part of Dave's vision, was never to give up. And then in June of 2016, the USPSTF came out with their final guidance. And I remember I was sitting at a Panera, having lunch, eating soup, and a friend called me who was an investor who said, Kevin, the guidelines have flipped and Cologuard is going to be in them. And we were A-rated, and that changed everything. But it presented a new challenge. And the new challenge was, how do we get this test that's in the guidelines to 100 million Americans? And I remember walking into my partner's office, our chief operating officer, Manish Arora, and saying, I think it's time we go on TV. That's the only way we're going to reach all Americans. He said, Kevin, we can't afford it. And I said, well, we can't not afford it either. We had $40 million in the bank, and we decided we were going to spend $30 million on TV if a test worked out. And what we did is we went and tested this little concept, this little talking box, which I thought was insane. I thought it wouldn't work. Shows you my marketing acumen. And Manish said, Kevin, watch, this is going to work. It's going to be an iconic, easy approach to screening. And over a 9-week period of time, we had 5 cities where we ran ads on cable TV, and 5 cities that were control cities. And the test cities grew 10% a week for 9 weeks in a row, and basically were double the rate of those control cities 9 weeks later. We went and bought every ad we could. Now, the interesting thing was 2016. There was a little thing going on in 2016 where a lot of people were watching cable TV. So we were also very fortunate because we were on Fox News and CNN and MSNBC, and everybody was watching the election and everybody was seeing our ads. And I remember somebody coming into my office saying how upset they were about what Sean Hannity said on Fox News, and we can't run any ads on Fox News. And I said, JP, look, Republicans and Democrats both get colon cancer. We're going to keep running ads on MSNBC and Fox News, and it changed everything. So then we could afford a larger sales force, which meant we could afford more television ads, which meant we could afford more salespeople, because there are millions of primary care healthcare providers in the US, a couple million, nurses, physician assistants, and docs. And so just over time, we kept at it. And finally, Pfizer, I've been knocking on their door in New York City for 3 years. And finally, they said, we want to co-promote Cologuard with you. And they brought 2,000 salespeople to this effort. And Cologuard just grew and grew and grew. And since that time, it took us 5 years to get to 1 million patients. It's taken us 5 years to now get to 15 million more patients. So we're at 16 million people tested so far. And in the second quarter of this year, for the first time ever, we broke 1 million people tested in 3 months. So it took a village to get there. During that time, I'll go back quickly. During that time, we didn't quite know how we were going to offer Cologuard. We thought we would offer our test through Quest and LabCorp, the two biggest labs in the country. And I went and sat down with the leader at LabCorp, and he said, well, Kevin, if you can get $500 reimbursement for it, we will pay you $100 to $150, but you're still gonna have to build your own sales force. And we're not gonna fight hard for you with the insurance companies. It's just not who we are or what we do. So after that meeting, I called a friend of mine, Kim Popovits, who ran a company called Genomic Health. And Kim, she was this amazing scientific medical background at Genentech. And she developed a test for breast cancer. And instead of offering it through the big labs, she built her own lab and offered it directly to oncologists in the breast cancer space. So she was an inspiration to us to say, okay, we'll develop our own lab. And as a result, all of the Cologuard tests are done in Madison, Wisconsin at our own lab. And we cut out that middleman that wanted to take all of the economics, all of the profit, and our ability to innovate in the future. And Kim was the inspiration for that. Well, Kim had focused at Genomic Health on this idea of changing the way breast cancer is treated. And there are 2.3 million cases every year, and globally. This is Kim. She's a Spartan. Now, I had known Kim for a dozen years, and we were sitting down talking one time, and I said, where are you from? And she said, you probably wouldn't know a little town called Flushing, Michigan. And I asked her who her dentist was. We shared the same dentist, my Uncle Ralph Knight. So we really formed a bond, and I called her in June of 2019 and said, Kim, we've talked a little bit about bringing our companies together. What do you think? And she said, I love the idea. And over the next couple of months, we hammered out an agreement that Genomic Health would become part of Exact Sciences. And the amazing work that Kim did was, with a team, developed a test that looked at early stage breast cancers, the most common type of HR positive, HER2 negative breast cancers. Now, these cancers, most patients don't benefit from chemotherapy, but some definitely benefit from chemotherapy. The question is, who are those people? And for the first time ever, you were able to peer into those cells and look at the RNA expression. It goes DNA, RNA, protein, at what's going on in the RNA that would distinguish who's going to benefit and who's not. And this is a patient report. It's a score of 0 to 100, and this patient, fortunately, was a 13, which meant there was only a 4% likelihood, 1 in 25, that she would have a recurrence at 9 years. That gives incredible comfort to that patient. And less than a 1% likelihood of benefiting from chemotherapy. So with this test, this patient was told, you don't have to undergo chemotherapy, which, by the way, it can cause other types of cancers later in life and a whole bunch of bad side effects. Today, this test is standard of care in the US and globally. About 80% of women diagnosed with this type of cancer get the Oncotype DX test. That was Kim. The test has multiple randomized studies that went on for 10 years, and it proved without question this test is accurate at making that call. Published 4 times in the New England Journal of Medicine. So now we have combined those two companies with the vision of being able to detect cancer earlier, prevent it, and also guide therapy. So we have 2 businesses. One is the screening and detecting all different types of cancers early, and the other is guiding therapy with this magical power of peering inside the cells, looking at the tumor DNA to guide treatment. And I'm going to zero in on, this has been the growth of the company. Since 2014, that first year of FDA approval, we had $2 million in sales. And this year we expect to be at $2.83 billion. So the company has grown from 2 or 3 of us to now 6,500 people. And we have ambitions to have a much bigger impact. Diagnostics is really hard because it's hard to get insurers to pay for innovation. The team at Exact Sciences is doing it and bringing real value with real clinical evidence. One of our tests, which I think eventually everybody in this room will have access to, is a blood-based test. We know that 67% of cancer deaths are from cancers that we don't screen for. And the idea of screening from one blood draw, we've now shown that we can detect up to 2/3 of cancers from a single blood draw of the most aggressive, deadly types of cancer, including pancreatic cancer, from a single blood draw. There's another technology that is called molecular residual disease. Think of a patient who has been diagnosed with stage 3 cancer, say breast cancer, and you want to determine after that surgery, did you get all of the tumor? Well, if you use a PET scan, you can't see the microscopic tumor that still exists. With a blood test, we now can do that. And if a patient after surgery is positive, has circulating tumor DNA in their blood, they are 10 times more likely to recur. It's no question. You want to separate the world into the people who are going to recur and the people who aren't? This blood test answers that question. And it is now being used by about 5% of patients with cancer. We think over the next 5 to 10 years, this is going to help transform oncology. So it's called MRD testing. If you know somebody who's been diagnosed with either a liquid tumor or a solid tumor, go look up MRD testing because it helps change outcomes. I'm going to just quickly go through a couple of things we think about as a company. Number one is most companies don't make it. They either get acquired or go away. We don't want to be one of those companies. Because the impact that you can have is a result of your ability to invest in R&D. We've invested $2.5 billion over the last 15 years in research and development. We know if somebody acquires us, the first thing they're going to cut is research and development. We can't let that happen. So we have to survive. How do we do that? We focus on a handful of key qualities that we look for in team members, and we try to develop as a team. We also say, we know what our economic engine is and how we do it. We start with great people. That's like, if you want to develop a great company, start with people who share the same values and passions that you do. Develop great tests. Go get run the hard studies that prove that your tests work. So when you go to a payer, you have real evidence, rock solid clinical evidence, we call it. Develop an incredible commercial organization because you have to reach physicians, patients, and insurers. And then take your technology platform, which connects doctors all over the country, all over the world, with patients, and that starts to generate momentum. We call this our flywheel, which leads to greater revenue and profits, which allows us to invest in the best scientists and the best research and development. This is, if people are doing something outside of these things at Exact Sciences, we ask them, raise your hand, let's have a discussion, let's get you working on one of these things. And some of the qualities that we look for really are the qualities that we saw in Dave Ahlquist and Graham Lidgard. That weird combination of humility and will. You know a lot of people who have unbelievable willpower, but frequently they run over people to get the job done. It is that rare person like Dave Ahlquist who was indomitable in his will, but had deep humility, the humility to ask questions, to learn, to be inviting to new ideas. That's a weird dynamic. And Graham Lidgard always attracted the very best scientists in the world. He's now emeritus status. And the vision to see something that other people couldn't see. These are the four qualities that all of our leaders are graded on every year. It's not all those other things. It's these four qualities. And we also have this rule about what we're not going to do. It's in the center here. It's what we're passionate about and what we can be the best in the world at. We can be the best in the world at cancer diagnostics. What drives our economic engines? Cancer diagnostics, not other diagnostics, cancer diagnostics. So we play right there in the center. And one of the things that I learned from the CEO of Trek Bikes, which is based just outside of Madison, Wisconsin, is, Kevin, you've got to talk about the harsh realities. Don't develop a company where people are afraid to just speak the truth. So we have these one-pagers. This is our business review. It's 2 pieces of paper. This and progress to plan. It's the good. You always hear from people all the good. That's easy. The brutal facts, writing down all the stuff that's going wrong and putting it on a piece of paper, me included, I do this to our board every month. Here's all the stuff that isn't going well. And then most importantly is help needed. Leaders are supposed to help. And that help needed part, that's where the magic is, because the different functions are saying, I need help, and they're not getting help. Our job as leaders is to help break down those walls and provide help. So this is kind of how we run. Exact Sciences is off 1 piece of paper once a week. This is we've simultaneously invested about $1.5 billion into an IT infrastructure that connects with most of the major health systems in the US. It has been a huge effort, but now you can order Cologuard electronically, you can get reminders for when you're due next, et cetera, et cetera. And so are we a technology company or a diagnostic company? It's one of the two. We can have that debate. Incredible customer service and connection with payers so that all of our bills, we bill electronically, we get paid electronically. We went from getting a fax for every test order, every one, to now, we still get about 20% of them, but most of them come in electronically, and we bill electronically. It's a huge advantage. And then this is just kind of our company in a nutshell. And I know our goal is to be the #1 cancer diagnostics company in the world in order to achieve that mission. And last spring, on a Saturday night, my phone started blowing up because this showed up on Saturday Night Live. One of our team members called me and said, what are we going to do about this? Because we had no idea SNL was in the works. And I said, Saturday Night Live doesn't make fun of you until people recognize your brand. So we're going to applaud this. And it's really been a labor of love when it gets to the point that, people are able to take care of their own health in an easy, comfortable, even funny way. And that really started to change things. The utilization of Cologuard peaked right after that SNL skit. So there you have it. And I know I probably went over, but happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So Kevin, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. And I wondered, could you talk a little bit about, you worked with scientists from Mayo. You're based in Madison and Wharf and University of Wisconsin. You're giving a talk at MSU. Could you talk a little bit about academic medicine and how it plays into what you guys do and how you think about that? Sure.
So all of our research and all of the underlying discoveries that went into Cologuard, the markers that were discovered, samples that we had to do testing on, all came from different collaborators. A significant one was Mayo Clinic. Johns Hopkins was another. We do some work, not as much as I would like, honestly, with University of Wisconsin. It takes a special, I think, mindset for an academic medical center to really get involved in big-scale clinical research, because sometimes they want to rewrite the clinical study. So I think that's, Dean, that's the friction that we sometimes run into. But Mayo Clinic has a different perspective. They just want to push the envelope in terms of what innovation they can bring through to patients, because have that 100+ year history of doing that. So it really depends on the institution. TGen is a research institution that's a part of the City of Hope in LA. We have a very close collaboration with. And the clinical trials that we run typically have about 100 different health systems that are a part of those clinical trials.
Curious
Mark.
to know if Theranos kind of hurt you when you were going through that time period when they were in all that trouble.
Yeah, so the question was about Theranos. It did. You know, when we watched that, I remember asking Graham Lidgard, Graham, is there anything to this Theranos? And Graham had developed a whole automated platform, which is still used today to do regular blood testing, like cholesterol testing or blood chemistry testing. And he said, no, Kevin, you can't get all of those markers from peripheral blood. He said, I don't know who is investing in this, but that's a basic biology problem. And she really hurt this industry and the whole field by making promises that aren't true. And that's why one of our 5 core values is integrity. We take that very, very seriously. When we present evidence, it has to be vetted by outsiders. You saw Tom Imperiali from University of Indiana, who was the lead investigator on our study talk. Tom didn't get paid a dime from Exact, doesn't benefit from Cologuard. Everything went through him on this study. So she didn't have any of those outsiders looking at things. She was just simply cheating and brought a terrible, terrible impact for a short period of time. I think we're past that now, that she was convicted, and Elizabeth Holmes, and was sent to prison. She should have been. She was doing testing on people that wasn't accurate. So it's important in our field to keep integrity number one.
You didn't lose any investors because of it?
Investors got scared away from the diagnostic field a little bit for a short while. Now, the important thing is to keep the long view and just keep doing things the right way. Have your publications be accepted by the New England Journal of Medicine, and that starts to become a competitive advantage over time. We deal with other, maybe lesser versions of Elizabeth Holmes all the time, because if you want to cheat, you can cheat. And some people do, and we see it. But over the long haul, if you do things the right way, guess what? In our view, you'll never get hurt. It may take you longer, it may take more money to do it the right way, but in the long run, there's a benefit to it.
Thank you, Kevin. I've never cried twice in a single talk. So at the emotional part at the beginning, and then certainly the laughter at the end. So thank you very much. My question has to do a little bit about that vision and the Spartan sort of will that you sort of put out there for all of us. There's 83 counties in Michigan. We have a lot of urban and rural counties across the state. And then because, teeing off on Aaron's question, we're part of a Big 10 Cancer Research Consortium. Maybe you could talk about how you might help tackle cancer in the state of Michigan through those 83 counties, and is there an opportunity here for this university and our partners?
Yeah, I think there is. What we have focused on over the last 3 or 4 years is this intense focus on health equity. When people think health equity, we encourage people to think rural and urban. The whole country. A lot of people don't have access to primary care. They certainly don't have access to a colonoscopy procedure. So we start with Cologuard because wherever the US Postal Service or UPS goes, Cologuard goes. And we are able to reach people in every county in the United States, and we do. We have partnerships now with federally qualified health centers all over the country. 7 or 8 years ago, they didn't really have much interest. Now, they see Cologuard as their #1 way to screen for colon cancer. Geisinger, which is a rural, really progressive health system in Pennsylvania, serving a lot of poor patients, a lot of Medicare patients. They do Cologuard before colonoscopy. They just offer Cologuard to a patient before they come visit the doc. They flipped it. So our ability to reach all the counties in Michigan, we are serving patients in all the counties in Michigan, but that's the start. When we develop a blood test, that will come on this infrastructure, the team, that technology platform that we talked about, so that we go back to that vision that Dave Ahlquist had in his first meeting, which was effectiveness equals sensitivity, which is the accuracy of the test, times the access. And that access, in our view, is delivery of an at-home test. So that it's an important goal because, look, advanced technologies need to get to everybody if you're going to have a big impact. And so that's a big, big part of who we are at Exact Sciences, is to try to make that happen.
Hi, thank you, Kevin. Very inspiring. So I have a question regarding the potential modality to use in future cancer care. So right now you mentioned about gene biomarker, methylation, and your vision, what will be like in the future?
We're going to have data that we release in the upcoming weeks about a blood-based colon cancer test, which is a combination of different markers. And it's a huge innovation to be able to screen for cancer from blood. We also, at the ESMO conference in Europe next week, we're going to be releasing data from our blood-based multi-cancer screening test. We ran a big study, and in that study, we looked at 21 different types of cancer. So we collected blood samples from 21 patients with 21 different types of cancers. I think it was about 3,000 plus 2,000 healthy controls. And so we'll be able to show there, we've already showed some of this data, that with only a 1.5% false positive rate, we can detect up to 66% of those patients with cancer by looking mainly at DNA methylation, also protein markers, and also DNA mutations circulating in the patient's blood. And it's been a Herculean effort. It's been 15 years of fundamental research, primarily with the Mayo Clinic, also over the last 5 years with Johns Hopkins, a full team effort to make this happen. And you know, I think that is going to change everything, because when you think about it, about 2% of people over age 50 are walking around with cancer and don't know it. 1 out of 50 people. So if you're screening a big population and you're screening just for one organ, well, the incidence rate of colon cancer is 0.5%. So 1 in 200 people. If you're screening a whole population looking for 1 in 200, you need to screen a lot more people to find one cancer than you do if you are looking for all cancers. And imagine if you had a test that could find even half of all cancers in a population. With a blood test, you're going to find those cancers before they become symptomatic. And if you find cancers before they become symptomatic, you have incredible hope. Even with pancreatic cancer, if you find it in stage 1. But once you get to stage 3 or 4 cancer, look, the outcomes are terrible. It's just hard to fight a wildfire after it has started. So that's really where we're going. And that was Dave Ahlquist's vision. Dave died of ALS in 2021. And he had this vision, and Dave was relentless. At times it was hard to work with Dave because of that indomitable will. Yes, he had incredible humility, but even if you were working 6.5 days a week, he wanted to see 7. And it was just this incredible story. So he was diagnosed with ALS. His wife, Susan, who's a good friend, said, Kevin, Dave is not going to be treated, no extraordinary things. He wants to go out on his own terms. And Dave shared that with us, but he didn't stop working. He was 69 years old. Like some people talk about retirement. Dave was 69 years old, dying of ALS, and he was on a call every Friday afternoon with our R&D team. And he was, the main reason for that call was for him to push that team along and get them to keep moving the science forward. It's easy to come up with excuses. So Dave said to the team, he died on a Saturday, and that Friday afternoon call, his wife propped him up. He was, at this point, immobile. And he told that team, I want to see data by March. Now, Dave knew he was dying. And that team came back to me and said, Kevin, we need the resources to get this done by March. Or it was by April. By March, they got that done with deep pride. And they showed the promise of those DNA methylation markers that Dave talked about in that first meeting that I had with them. And that spirit is, I mean, it's what it takes. It takes that next level of dedication and focus and commitment. The other really cool story about Dave, he was this, an incredible outdoorsman. He knew every bird in the sky. He hiked and mountains and all over his home state of Minnesota. And his younger sister asked him, Dave, how will I know that you're still here? And Dave said, I will come visit in nature. I will come visit all of you in nature. So the day that he died in his home, his next door neighbor came over and said, hey, Susan, can you let Dave know that there's an eagle that has been circling this house, your house, for 2 hours? And Susan said, Dave passed away. Fast forward, we were at Dave's funeral service a year later because of COVID in downtown Rochester, Minnesota at the art building. And my wife Sheila, and the story is incredible, were walking along the river in Rochester, and a lady said, look, do you see it? There was an eagle circling the Art Institute where his friends and family had gathered. So I think he's still out there. He certainly, that physician in him, Aaron, the intense focus on research, coupled with our intense focus on entrepreneurship, it has created magic. And so I think it's that magic that will allow the company to move forward and be inspired. And we look forward in the years to come to sharing that. And I would personally love to come back to Grand Rapids and help bring those innovations through Michigan State. And just once again want to thank you, Joan, Norm Beauchamp, Christina, thank you for bringing me back into the Michigan State fold a few years ago. And I hope we get a chance at Exact Sciences to collaborate. Thank you.
So Kevin, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing a wonderful story, right? Moving and inspiring and fascinating and all of that. So thank you so much. And I want to also thank you and your family for helping support that at MSU in the future through the Tom and Lupe Izzo professorship in cancer engineering, and between the College of Engineering and the College of Human Medicine. That kind of faith and generosity is a part of what helps build a great institution for the future, and our ability to provide benefit all across the state, the country, and the world, as you do. So I want to thank you. Once again, I want to thank the Secchia family for making this possible, for Peter and company. Christina and Norm, Norm Beauchamp went to school with Kevin, and so that's, as he said, brought him back to the green and white, to the Spartan fold. So thank you guys for making that possible. Thank you all for being here today. Thank you for all you do to support the college, our faculty, and our students. Thank you for all you do for this community in West Michigan and Grand Rapids. It is great to be with you, and please enjoy the rest of the morning. Thank you so much.